Welcome to the Hall of Fame edition of VI Sports. I'm Kevin Charach, hosting from the Save on Foods Memorial Center as we honor the 2015 inductees to the Greater Victoria Sports Hall of Fame. I'm joined alongside Lois Smith. She's the chair of the selection committee for the Greater Victoria Sports Hall of Fame, correct?
Yes.
Where do you even start? There's so many big sports names, prominent sports figures in this community. What's the selection process like?
Well, Victoria has an absolutely amazing sports history, and we have an overall master list of approximately 300 potential inductees. And these include athletes, teams, coaches, officials, builders, sponsors, clubs. And each year, the Induction Nominations Committee has to decide on who are the most outstanding uninducted people on that list. It's not an easy process.
Well, let's get right to it and introduce you, the viewer, to the inductees. Produced by Mike Walker of Roll Focus Productions. We start off with our first group, the Olympians.
While I played hockey, while I played basketball, while I did everything else, swimming was a summertime thing. And then basically I was going off to university and wanted to partake in a university sport and came out here and started swimming at UVic in 1997. And after about 3 months, I went to my first sort of major competition. And at my first national championships, I ended up coming third in the 200 freestyle. So it just kind of snowballed from there. It was, well, I'm actually not bad at this, so let's see where we can take this.
Rick was always somebody that I knew about and looked up to as a kid, and I've always said I didn't have a lot of sporting heroes, but I think in retrospect he's someone that I idolized slightly because he was that guy to beat on the Canadian national team. Being able to be a world-class athlete in a program that had never really had that, I think is really difficult. And Rick, no matter where he was training, whether it was here in Victoria, in Calgary, or anywhere in between, he was ready to be the best athlete he can.
Why I continued doing it was a desire to win. And I think that will always burn in me is, I loved competing, I loved racing, I loved looking over at that guy beside him and saying, you know, I practiced this, I trained this, I worked on this, and now I get that opportunity to show what I worked on. And I was on the national team for over, well, a decade. And, you know, that was a major part of it. But, you know, another side of it was I learned how to train and value the hard work and value the commitment and value the, you know, the day-to-day sort of grind and slog of it all.
As much as maybe pushed everyone's boundaries a little bit in a good way, it's one of those things that made it an entertaining and, you know, happy place to be. And at the end of the day, I'm so thankful to be the athlete I am now, to have had somebody like that took the time and energy into, you know, helping you through those first experiences.
You know, I didn't want to just be here, swim, and leave. I wanted to make a difference and have something that was a long-term difference and a lasting difference, and that's something that could be built on and move forward.
I can remember I prayed, God, you know, if you find me a sport that I can do well at, then I'm going to work really, really hard. If you can find me a sport where I can beat the big kids, you know, I'll just really train hard at it.
And I was a camp counselor at a camp in Northern Ontario, and I had just gotten into the sport of running, and I was pretty keen, and I had a group of kids there, and there were one set of black eyes that looked very enthusiastic, very, you know, keen, I think, to try pretty well anything.
And so here was my sport, here was my shot. It was the answer to my prayers. And so if being a runner was being a marathoner, then I wanted to be a marathoner.
The following spring, he sent me a letter, and it was a newspaper article, and it was a picture of Bruce, you know, getting ready to run the Ottawa Marathon, which he ended up doing at a very young age of 12, which normally you would not promote that. Thank goodness some of the track people and the running specialists in Ottawa area swooped in and rescued him from himself.
Probably one of the most difficult and painful marathons I've ever done, but it was completely inexperienced and a victim of my own enthusiasm. I moved to Victoria after the '96 Games. One of the legacies of the Commonwealth Games was that they started this centre, and I was like the first athlete to move to the centre. And I'm right into the coaching thing right now. I'm really enjoying it. I've got a group of about 22, 23 people. Most of them are between, 14 and 17. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun to see them succeed and see them get personal bests.
And that's that enthusiasm and the passion that he's got for the sport. But the great thing is too that, he spent a lot of time doing it and achieved, really greatness with the sport. He's giving back now to other kids. So, he's going full circle. But, I think if he still laces up the shoes, he's still got that passion. And it's amazing that, he keeps that fire alive for so long.
Well, it's definitely a family thing. My dad in particular really loves the sport and was keen to get his whole family involved. And having that older brother who skied, it was not really an option that I was not going to do it. I loved it right away, so it was just something we did as a family. I progressed fairly quickly through the system. I spent 2 years with the provincial team and then made the national team when I was 16.
The 2010 games were going to be a game changer because they were on home soil. And I think the fact that, she was going to school and it was her third games and she was juggling so many life pieces and then contributing to history in Canadian sport and in Canadian parasport, where it wasn't really on the map in 2010, and 2010 put it on the map, and it was wins like Lauren's that got us there.
I never went into it thinking I was going to win 5 gold. That would have been a stupid goal. Definitely by the 5th, I could feel the magnitude of it. Tried not to, but it was impossible. You pass newspapers and people talking about it all the time. Just huge pride to be able to do that in our home country and in front of friends and family. And yeah, just for me personally, just to perform the best that I could have in those 5 events was, you just can't ask for anything more, so it was awesome.
I think if you ask some of the athletes that went on to Sochi, they would say that, Lauren was a mentor for them in terms of their success on the Sochi playing field. And as we go forward, all of those athletes that go before lay the groundwork. And I think in Lauren's case, she's continued to be a leader in sport in BC through her involvement on the Via Sport Board of Directors. So it's an opportunity for her to share her legacy in a different way as she goes forward.
It'll always be close to me, and it's always something I want to stay connected to motivate young athletes and share my experience and yeah, keep growing the movement in Canada for sure.
A few fun facts for you for those inductees. Lauren Wollstonecroft, born with no legs below her knees and no left arm, captured 8 Paralympic gold medals. Bruce Deakin, the marathoner, competed in 2 Olympic Games, Atlanta and Sydney, plus 3 first-place finishes in the California International Marathon. And Rick Say competed in 3 Olympic Games and set Canadian records in 5 individual events. Lois, beyond the accolades and awards, what is it that stands out to you about these athletes?
Oh, these athletes have such drive and such determination. They have, can you imagine the dedication and the commitment and the work ethic they have and the passion they must have for their sport to achieve what they've achieved?
All right, we've got to take a quick break. When we come back, more on the Greater Victoria Sports Hall of Fame class of 2015.
You're watching VI Sports on ShawTV.
Welcome back to VI Sports, the Hall of Fame edition, celebrating the Greater Victoria Sports Hall of Fame class of 2015. Let's get to our next group of athletes, a group with no shortage of national and international success.
I was in the Royal Canadian Navy, and during lunch hour I used to go into the small bore range and shoot 22. The chief in there said, you ought to come to Heels Range. And he showed me a cupboard, put 24 rifles in it. He said, pick one and I'll see you there on Saturday. That was the start and never stopped. The big thing in our sport was to be on the Canadian team to go to England. And I finally made that, and that was a big stepping stone, and just sort of snowballed after that. All of my children were involved. My son Ed he would run the butts where all the kids worked to pull the targets up and down.
Except when I got called up for the father and son match and beat him those few times. Oh, he was proud as punch, I'll tell you. Our whole childhood was spent around the rifle range, having fun, meeting all the people, the wonderful parties we had at our house that maybe lasted a little bit too late in the morning, but he had it all, and he did a lot of coaching. He was one of the best coaches in Canada, if not the best. I know he got everything out of it. You know, it was to have something like that you can do that much of and be that good at, and have your family supporting you and around you, and we all had such a great time, whatever our involvement was in it. You know, I think that was just everything. I know it was.
My wife and my family supported me unconditionally and allowed me to just keep going. And the challenges were always there. But I think the most important one for me is to have coached young people and to see their success and to hear them say thanks.
When I was coming up, you know, you played at all your local parks, and you know, the dads did all the coaching, and you just kind of, you know, you went out and had fun.
We bought him a plastic bat that was about 4 inches across the barrel so that he could hit the ball when he started out.
So no, that was when he was 2.
That was when he was 2, yeah.
2.
So from age 2, he was hitting the ball and throwing it around. So I was one of those parents that ended up being the coach. So from about age 6 to 16 or 17, I was the guy standing there yelling at him. So.
Never thought that that phone call would come. You know, being in little old Victoria and playing in the different ballparks around here, the exposure was just not like it is today.
It was so early in that whole process of Canadians being drafted into an American sport, as they like to call it, that we were just, you know, pretty impressed and excited that, you know, Steve was even a contender for such a thing. So,
you know what, I had never watched a baseball game in my life before I met Steve. It's amazing for someone to be able to stand and do that, do what they need to do under such stressful circumstances, and to make it look easy. I mean, it's exciting. The whole aspect of it is exciting.
You know, baseball's alive and well in Canada, and the coaching and the programs that are out there are just you know, top notch now. I mean, I think in some small way, you know, I was a part of that. You know, myself and the guys before me really opened the eyes of some of the organizations down in the States, and you know, I think I have a lot to give back to the game, and the opportunity to help take kids, you know, to that next level, and hopefully they find that passion that I had, and continue on, and hopefully their dreams come true as well.
When I was 6 years old, first started at elementary school, they had a wonderful juvenile program in the elementary school and at Windsor Park. Anything in season, we would all play. And we would be at elementary school at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the teacher would chuck out whatever ball was in season.
Ike was an inspiration to everybody because his level of fitness was exceptional.
When I played professional, I didn't train with the teams. And I was a phys ed teacher, so it was pretty easy. You know, I'd send the class out for a 2-mile run, and I'd wait till the last guy rounded the corner, and then I'd try to be first back.
Before I really got to know him well, we watched him play in the the local high-end teams, and he was quite recognizable as being a player who dominated his position on the field. He ended up playing the Vancouver Royals in Vancouver, a semi-professional team, which sort of jump-started his career, I would think, in terms of Canadian national Olympic team playing.
My last game was with Vic West. When I was 36, we won the Canadian Championship there. Fun chapter, great, and I met so many nice people, people that I was playing with, coaches that I've met, you know, and I've been privileged to play under some remarkably good coaches. But anyway, I'm looking at my daughter over here, and I'm looking at all the potential she's got if she ever gets going and really takes the game up. I've had a little bit of chance to coach her and play a little bit with her, so that part would be something to look forward to for sure.
A few more tidbits about those athletes. Ike McKay, he was born on Gabriola Island, graduated from Oak Bay Secondary, was a member of the Canadian national soccer team, played professionally in the North American Soccer League for the Vancouver Royals and Portland Timbers. The Portland Timbers, the same team that won this year's MLS.
And one of the things that really stood out for us about Ike, he was a real trailblazer in that if he wasn't the very first, he was one of the very first Canadians to ever play professional soccer in Europe.
Another fun fact, and also if you look at Steve Sinclair, who also played overseas professional baseball, he also played in North America for the Toronto Blue Jays and Seattle Mariners. And then if you look at Sandy Pedant, who really seemed like the Mr. Everything for the sport of shooting.
Oh, he was, and we could have inducted Sandy as a coach, we could have inducted him as an administrator, we chose to focus on his athletic achievements. So many of the builders get their starts as athletes, and then they stay with the sport when the competitive days are finished. They go into coaching, administration, they're on boards of directors, they are event organizers. Sandy's been there, done that, everything.
Well, let's talk about Sandy, and let's talk about the sport of shooting, because obviously it's not, you know, in the same conversation in terms of mainstream sports as, say, soccer or professional baseball. Is that something that you're looking for? You're looking for a variety of sports?
Oh yes. The fact that the sport is not perhaps as well known as hockey does not mean that the achievement is any less. In fact, very often it's more lack of funding, lack of sponsorship, lack of exposure. It's an uphill fight for a lot of these athletes in some of the more obscure sports.
And shooting those targets from a distance takes a ton of athletic ability. If you've ever seen the Olympics, it is quite impressive. All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we profile the builders category. We'll see you in a bit.
You're watching VI Sports on ShawTV.
Welcome back. Now, Lois, we've covered the athlete category for the Greater Victoria Sports Hall of Fame class of 2015. We got pro soccer, pro baseball players, Olympians. But now we're going to go to builders, the builders of sport. What does it mean to be a builder?
The builders are the people who allow the athletes to do what they do, who help and support the athletes by coaching, by officiating, by turning out at rinks at 4 o'clock in the morning, by organizing events, by fundraising, all to enable the athlete to become proficient at their sport.
The movers and shakers, the difference makers, maybe the behind the scenes people.
I like the difference makers, yes.
The difference makers. All right, here are the builders.
I came from a curling family where my parents and their siblings all played, and so I was exposed to a lot. Curling was definitely not the cool sport in high school, and yes, we definitely got a hard time at the bus stop after school with my curling broom. You had to really be very in love with what you were doing to go through that kind of humiliation.
We gave her a hard time. She had, back in the day, had some pretty wild curling slacks and sweaters and that sort of stuff. She was always very, very passionate about the sport, and you know, there was a point where she decided to quit her job and take on curling as a full-time career, you know, coaching. And everybody thought she was crazy and that she was making a huge mistake. And we all look back now and go, wow, what a spectacular decision. And we had no idea that she would rise to the level of success that she has.
Definitely feel that I owe the game something still. I feel so lucky and privileged to have been able to enjoy a life as a professional coach and a volunteer coach. It's just an amazing thing to be able to do what you love and what you're passionate about, and to be able to do that for a living has been a dream come true for me. And with that, I feel a lifelong commitment to give back in every way possible. And part of that is definitely here in my home in Victoria, to make sure that anybody in Victoria that has an interest in curling has an opportunity to try it, because it's just an amazing sport.
Art Burgess was the new director at the Y, and I ran into him on the street, and because I had done gymnastics before, he says, "Ed, have you been to the new Y?" And I said, "No." So he said, "Come on, I'll take you around." And anyway, 2 days later he phones me, and he says, Ed. I said, "Who is this?" He says, "It's Art, I've separated my ribs. Can you help me?" "What do you want?" "Take my wrestling class over." I said, "I know nothing about wrestling." "Oh, you can do it." So that was in October of '64. Art never came back downstairs. And that was it. That was the beginning of my wrestling career.
Somebody who's given more to wrestling in British Columbia than anybody could ever be expected to do. Who's still coaching in their early 80s, over 50 years of active coaching, not just administration, but active coaching.
When I was a kid, I used to box, and the training is what is important. The training, the learning the skills, just like gymnastics. It was a camaraderie that you develop with the kids that are on your team.
We know you're always going to be in the corner. In fact, you might be in the corner for one of our athletes because you don't know he's one of our athletes, and that goes with being 81, Ed.
That's again, yeah. The kids were so good to me. Some of them were single-parent family. And two of them, when they talk to me on the phone, they say, "Hey, Dad, you're my dad. I love you." Hey, can't beat that.
Ed Ashmore, he's known as Mr. Wrestling across the island. He's coached and refereed at the sport's highest level. He's 81 years old and he's still coaching. Meanwhile, Elaine Dag-Jackson has coached 5 Olympic Games and 16 World Curling Championships. Lois, I'm guessing that's how you define a builder.
Yes, that's the kind of commitment and dedication people bring to the sport. Elaine herself was an athlete before going full-time into coaching. Ed got into coaching by accident. He was asked to start a program at the YMYWCA, and all these years later, he's still doing it. That is commitment.
It's pretty amazing that you say that. I mean, great stories, but that's what stands out to me is that a lot of these stories, there's that serendipitous theme almost where people kind of got into their sport by accident. Mm-hmm. Ed Ashmore, he was a substitute teacher at the YMCA, YWCA. He gets into wrestling. And then you see Sandy Peden, a football and basketball player, hurts his leg and then he gets into shooting. Yes. It's almost that you don't really know what your passion is until you kind of go out there and discover it yourself, right?
Yes, and that's why we hope that the displays here in the Save-On Foods Memorial Centre can be an inspiration to the next generation of young athletes, that they can look and see all the different things there are to try and that they too can find their passion.
And I imagine there's many more passionate current and past athletes out there and builders who are wondering about 2016. Talk to me about the 2016 nomination process.
Nominations for the 2016 year open on January 1st. And we are always looking for suggestions and recommendations, although I do have to say that there's no guarantee that any nominee will be selected in the year in which they're nominated. But if anyone knows of somebody who thinks is deserving recognition, just go to our website, and that's gvshof.ca. Click on the inductees tab, and you will find the nomination criteria and the nomination form. And we encourage people to check out the website, read the fabulous stories of all of our inductees, and to, by all means, submit names for our consideration.
And from covering sports in the Victoria South Island area, I can tell you, and as you already know, there are plenty of worthy candidates for 2016. Lois, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
That's the class of 2015 for the Greater Victoria Sports Hall of Fame. For everyone here at VI Sports, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kevin Charach. Follow us on Twitter, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.